It was a Wednesday evening, 7:42 p.m. to be exact, when my husband called me his angel. He said it like he always did, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, tie loosened, phone in hand, his voice soft and casual. "Couldn't do this life without you, Evelyn," he said, pressing a kiss to my cheek before heading upstairs. I remember smiling at him, but it wasn't the same kind of smile as before. Something in me was already watching, already measuring. He smelled of the cologne I bought him last Christmas, oakwood and leather, but there was something new under it. Something floral. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual that night. The potatoes boiled over and I didn't even move. I just stood there staring at the phone he'd left on the counter. It wasn't locked. He never locked it. Not because he trusted me, but because he believed I'd never look. And for 23 years he'd been right. I wiped my hands on the dish towel slowly, as if the air around me had turned to glass. Then I opened his messages. The first thing I noticed was the way she wrote his name. Babe. Not dear, not love. Babe. That was how I used to call him before I learned silence was safer. Her name glowed at the top of the screen. Margaret L. My stomach turned cold. Margaret Lewis. My best friend for 35 years. The next message was only 6 words. "You smelled like her again today." I scrolled. Another. "Wish you were here instead." And another. "She'll never know, she trusts you." I didn't feel my knees give out, but somehow I was sitting on the floor. The phone was still in my hands, heavy as if it had learned the weight of what it carried. Outside, the sprinkler hissed against the window. I could smell wet grass and burnt potatoes. It was all ordinary. That was the cruelest part. When I could finally breathe again, I put the phone back where it was and washed my hands. Twice. The water was too hot, but I didn't flinch. He came back down a few minutes later, smiling. "Something burning?" I nodded. "Dinner." He laughed, poured himself a drink, and never noticed the silence had changed. The next morning I did everything I always did. I made his breakfast, packed his lunch, kissed his cheek before he left for work. Routine can be a cage, or a shield. When the door closed behind him, I sat at the table with my coffee and replayed every conversation I'd had with Margaret in the past 6 months. The lunches, the little jokes, the sympathy in her voice when she'd say, "You've been through so much, Ev. You deserve peace." I almost laughed. Peace. At 10 I drove to the grocery store, though we didn't need a thing. I just needed to see people, faces that didn't lie to me. But everyone looked the same. Strangers smiling, couples arguing about bread, a young cashier asking how my day was. "Lovely," I said. My voice didn't tremble. On the way home I passed Margaret's salon. The blinds were open. She was inside, sweeping hair off the floor, humming like she didn't have a care in the world. Our eyes met through the glass for a brief second. She waved. I waved back. That was the moment I knew she thought I didn't know. And that gave me something she didn't have. Time. For the next week I watched them both. Not the kind of watching that makes you crazy, but the kind that makes you clear. I noticed when he started keeping his phone face down. When she stopped mentioning him in our calls. When they both used the same excuses to be unavailable on Thursdays. I wasn't jealous. I was curious. That's what happens when pain cools. It sharpens into precision. At night, while he slept beside me, I'd scroll through his phone, reading pieces of their world. Secret lunches, hotel receipts, the soft words I used to earn. I didn't cry. Tears would have made it real too soon. One message caught my eye. Next week. Her birthday dinner. She won't suspect a thing. My birthday was next week. They were planning something. Probably dinner, gifts, laughter, lies. It was almost poetic. That night I lay awake listening to his breathing. Steady. Peaceful. I thought about all the times I'd defended him, all the apologies I'd given him for things I hadn't done. And somewhere between anger and clarity, I felt something dangerous settle in me. Not rage. Not revenge. Purpose. On Thursday morning I decided to visit Margaret. I brought her a box of muffins from the bakery she liked. She greeted me with open arms, smiling too wide, voice too bright. Ev. What a surprise. Her salon smelled of hairspray and rose perfume, the same scent I'd noticed on him. I breathed it in slowly. She led me to the back room, talking about some client's wedding hairdo, pretending everything was normal. I nodded along, smiling politely, my eyes scanning every corner of that room. A framed photo of us at my son's graduation sat on the shelf. Me, her, and my husband side by side. My husband's arm around her waist. How had I never noticed that before? Do you still talk to Tom's cousin? I asked suddenly. She blinked. No, not really. Why? Just wondering, I said and took a slow sip of coffee. Her hand trembled slightly when she picked up the comb. That was my confirmation. Guilt always shows in the small things. Before I left, I hugged her. She smelled like betrayal wrapped in sugar. That evening, I cooked his favorite meal. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, and the same red wine he'd opened the night before. He was cheerful, talking about work, about new projects, about how tired he'd been lately. Maybe we should take a trip, he said. Just the two of us. I smiled. That sounds nice. Inside, I wondered if he could hear the hollowness in my voice. He didn't. Men like him never do. When he went to shower, I picked up his phone again. Another message, just one line. Tomorrow. Can't wait to see you again. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Then I texted back just one heart emoji. I wanted her to think it was him. The next day I woke before dawn. The sky outside was gray, heavy with rain. I made his breakfast, kissed him goodbye, watched his car disappear down the street. Then I sat in the living room waiting. At 9:10 a.m. Margaret texted him again. You left your watch here last time. Want me to bring it to you? My hands were steady when I replied. No need. I'll pick it up myself. I took my coat and drove. The rain had started to fall, thin streaks across the windshield. The kind of rain that doesn't wash anything away, just blurs it. When I arrived, she looked startled. Evelyn. I wasn't expecting you. I figured I'd save him the trouble, I said, stepping inside. Her smile faltered. The trouble. I nodded toward the watch on her counter. He forgets things sometimes. For a moment we stood there in silence, the sound of rain tapping against the window. Her face paled. Mine didn't change. I picked up the watch, slid it into my purse and looked around her salon one more time. Everything was pink, soft, gentle, like her. Or the version of her she wanted the world to see. You've redecorated, I said. Yeah, she whispered. Felt like a fresh start. Fresh starts are good, I said quietly. They help you see what's worth keeping. Our eyes met. He knew. Not everything, not yet, but enough to make her uncomfortable. I left without another word. That night my husband came home early holding flowers, roses the same color as Margaret's lipstick. For my birthday? I asked softly. He laughed. Just because. He didn't notice the missing watch. He didn't notice the way I was watching him, memorizing every detail. The way he avoided my eyes, the small tremor in his hands, the faint scent of rose perfume clinging to his collar. When he kissed my forehead and whispered, "You'll always be my angel," I finally believed him. Just not in the way he meant. Because angels, I've learned, don't always protect. Sometimes they simply watch and wait. He called me his angel again that night. The words should have meant warmth, but they slid over my skin like ice. I watched him pour wine, watched his hands, the same hands that had once built our first home together, steady and practiced as ever. He didn't look at me when he said it this time. He didn't need to. I smiled just enough to keep the peace and asked if he'd remembered our anniversary next week. He grinned, confident the way liars do. Of course, he said. I've got something special planned. So did I. For the next few days I moved through the house like a ghost that still knew the routines of the living. I cleaned, folded, and cooked with the same rhythm as always. But underneath it something else was working, quiet, precise, and unstoppable. At dawn I started researching how to build what I needed. The idea came from one of his favorite phrases. He used to say people should face themselves honestly. A mirror felt poetic. A gift that watched back. I had an old one in the attic, a tall frame from my mother's house, heavy oak with a faded gilt edge. I ordered a small camera online, hidden in the shipment of craft supplies I bought for my art shop. He never asked questions about those. He'd stopped paying attention years ago. When the package arrived, I waited until he left for work. The house was quiet except for the steady hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock. I unpacked everything carefully, my fingers steady as I wired the small lens into the frame. I'd already mapped the angles in my head, how it would face the fireplace, how the reflection would capture the whole living room. Every twist of wire felt like reclaiming something I'd lost. By evening it was done. The mirror looked harmless, even elegant. When I stood before it, my own reflection stared back, calm and deliberate. For the first time in years, I didn't look like someone who could be hurt. That night, I told him I'd been thinking of redecorating the living room before our anniversary dinner. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Do whatever you like," he said. "You always make things look nice." I smiled at the glow of his screen reflected in his glasses. He didn't notice the faint smear of lipstick, hers not mine, on his collar. 2 days later, I went to Margaret's salon. She was cheerful, almost too much, her laughter echoing through the empty space. "Ev, you look radiant," she said. "Just keeping busy," I replied. We chatted about clients, neighbors, the new paint color she'd chosen for the walls. All surface talk. But beneath it, every word was a test. When I mentioned the upcoming anniversary, her hand froze mid-air for a second, just enough for me to notice. "Tom must be planning something wonderful," she said finally. "I'm sure he is," I answered. "He's always thoughtful." That small flicker in her eyes told me everything. Guilt leaves shadows even in bright rooms. I left with a polite smile, driving home through the drizzle, the world outside washed in gray. By the time I reached the house, my decision was set like cement. The following morning, I prepared the living room. The mirror went up beside the fireplace, facing the sofa where he liked to sit with his drink. I adjusted the frame until I could see the entire reflection through my phone's camera feed. It was seamless. Perfect. When he came home that evening, he noticed the change immediately. "You moved the old mirror?" I nodded. "Thought it deserved some attention again." He ran a hand along the frame. "You always know how to make things feel like home." His words sounded genuine. Maybe they were. But truth and lies have the same tone when spoken by a man who thinks you'll never leave. After dinner, I watched him glance at his phone again and again. I didn't say a word. He excused himself early, claiming exhaustion. I waited until the bedroom door closed before checking the hidden feed. He was in the living room, pacing, typing, deleting, typing again. Then he smiled at something on the screen. The same smile I used to wait for. I muted the phone and kept watching until he finally went upstairs. The week before our anniversary passed in a strange calm. Every morning he kissed my forehead. Every night I smiled back. But inside, the temperature kept dropping. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his pants pocket, from a jewelry store downtown. The name of the clerk was written in blue ink at the bottom. Not mine. So he was buying her something too. I held the receipt for a moment, then tore it into small pieces and dropped them into the trash. He'd never notice. People rarely do when they assume the world will clean up after them. That evening I baked his favorite pie. When he complimented it, I laughed softly and said, "You'll have to save room for dessert next week." He winked, completely unaware. 2 days before the anniversary, I visited the craft store again. The clerk asked if I was planning something special. "Yes," I said. "A surprise for my husband." He smiled, not knowing how true that was. That night, I set the table early, polishing the silverware until I could see my reflection bend in the metal. I imagined Margaret's face there, distorted, fading. The house smelled of cinnamon and soap. Everything was in its place, too perfect, too quiet. He came home late, claiming work had run long. I noticed the faint shimmer of lip gloss on his collar again. Different shade this time. Peach, not rose. Margaret liked to change things up. He handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a necklace. Simple gold, nothing extravagant. "I saw it and thought of you," he said. I nodded, my fingers brushing the delicate chain. "It's beautiful." He smiled. "You deserve it." I wanted to ask, do I? But I didn't. The mirror caught our reflections as we spoke. Two people who once believed in each other. On the morning of our anniversary, I woke early. The world outside was silver with frost, the windows misted from the heat inside. I brewed coffee, cracked eggs, and hummed to fill the silence. When he came down, he looked tired. "Big day," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I hope you're ready for it." I placed the mirror's camera feed on my phone, testing the angle one last time. Everything worked perfectly. He left after breakfast, promising to be home by 7. I spent the day preparing. The dinner, the wine, the soft jazz he liked in the background. I even lit candles, their flames flickering in the mirror's reflection. As evening approached, I changed into a blue dress he'd once called timeless. Felt like wearing memory. At exactly 7, his car pulled into the driveway. I heard his laughter through the open window before I saw him. Another voice answered, hers. They entered the house together, hand in hand, whispering like teenagers sneaking into a movie. My heart didn't race. It was strangely still, like watching a play you've already seen. Evelyn, he called softly. No answer. He looked around, confused, then shrugged and poured 2 glasses of wine. Margaret giggled. She must have gone out. He smirked. Perfect. They sat on the couch, the firelight dancing across their faces. My camera caught every flicker, every touch, every stolen glance. From the small monitor upstairs I watched. I recorded. I memorized. When Margaret noticed the mirror, she smiled. You moved this, it's beautiful. He nodded. She's sentimental about it. Neither of them realized it was watching them back. I didn't interrupt. Not yet. Instead, I waited until they grew comfortable, until laughter replaced caution. That's when he toasted to us, he said, and she laughed, saying, You mean to her? I watched his hesitation, the small flicker of fear in his eyes when her joke landed too close to truth. He recovered quickly, but I saw it. A crack in his confidence. The night stretched on, each minute carving another inch off what little heart I had left. But revenge, I'd learned, isn't fire. Ice. It takes time to settle, to shape, to freeze the right way. When the clock struck 9, I turned off the monitor. I'd seen enough. Upstairs, I sat by the window staring out at the dark yard. The mirror downstairs would remember everything for me. I didn't need to. Tomorrow the recording would go somewhere safe. Somewhere that would hurt exactly the way truth should. And when he looked at me again and called me his angel, I'd smile. Because by then I'd already built his heaven. And I was about to show him what happens when angels stop forgiving. When angels stop forgiving, they start remembering. That's what I told myself as I stood at the sink the next morning, rinsing out the coffee pot like any other day. The house smelled faintly of smoke from the fire that had burned too long last night. It clung to the curtains, to the cushions, to my hair. But beneath it I caught another scent, floral, sweet, and unmistakably mine. My perfume. It lingered on the air like a ghost I hadn't invited. I hadn't worn it in months. The bottle sat half full on my vanity upstairs, the cap smudged with fingerprints that weren't mine. I felt the smallest twitch in my jaw, a pulse of something between nausea and fury. She'd used it. She'd walked through my home wearing my scent, breathing it in like she belonged here. That morning sunlight fell across the kitchen table, revealing 2 faint lipstick stains on a glass I hadn't washed yet. One was mine. One wasn't. I poured the coffee slowly, deliberately, watching the dark liquid swirl. It should have tasted bitter, but it didn't. It was strangely calm, like the stillness before a storm breaks open. By the time Tom came down, I'd already composed myself. He looked tired, distracted, almost childlike in his guilt. If guilt was something he could still feel. Did you sleep? He asked. Well enough, I replied. You? He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. Long night. Yes, I said. I heard. He froze for half a second before forcing a smile. Heard what? I met his eyes. The laughter. From downstairs. I didn't want to interrupt. His expression flickered, a quick flash of panic he tried to hide with a chuckle. You must have been dreaming, Evelyn. Maybe, I said softly. Dreams do strange things to memory. Later, while he left for work, I walked through the house. The mirror caught my reflection as I passed, the lens inside it still running. I hadn't reviewed the footage yet. I didn't need to. Every moment from last night was carved into me. Still, part of me wanted to see it again. Not the betrayal, I already knew what that looked like, but the way they moved. How comfortable she'd seemed in my living room. How she must have leaned in close, her skin brushing his, my perfume wrapping around them like an unholy blessing. When I finally opened the recording, the sound filled the room. Their voices. Their laughter. Her calling him darling. I watched in silence until I couldn't anymore. Then I pressed pause, took a breath, and saved the file under a new name. Anniversary Gift, Part 2. The name made me smile. Not out of joy. Out of precision. Around noon, Margaret called. Her voice was light, almost giddy. Ev. I meant to check. How did your anniversary go? Did he surprise you? Her tone was sugar over glass. I could hear the tremor she didn't want me to notice. Oh, he surprised me, I said. You could say that. She laughed, a touch too high-pitched. I told him he'd better treat you right. You deserve it. That's kind of you, I replied. We both know how generous he can be, when he wants to be. Silence stretched across the line. I could hear her swallow. Then she muttered something about clients arriving and hung up. I stood by the window staring at the reflection of my face in the glass. So older than I remembered but stronger too. That evening Tom came home with flowers. Lilies, white, fragrant and too much. He kissed my cheek as though petals could cover ashes. For you, he said. They're beautiful, I answered. They smell familiar. He didn't catch it. He never did. While he showered, I went to the vanity again. The perfume bottle sat there slightly askew. I lifted it, studied the faint smudge along the cap and dabbed a drop onto my wrist. It didn't smell the same anymore. Maybe the scent had changed or maybe I had. When he came out, towel around his neck, I asked, "Do you like this perfume?" He smiled lazily. "You always smell good, Eve." "Yes," I said, turning away. Apparently, I'm not the only one who thinks so. The next few days passed in the same rhythm, but something had shifted. He became more attentive, more careful. Maybe he sensed something. Maybe guilt makes men clumsy. He began texting less, staying home more. He even asked if I wanted to go out for dinner that Friday. "Just the two of us," he said. The words sounded like a peace offering. But peace is only useful after war and I hadn't finished fighting. So I agreed. That sounds lovely. That night I went into his study while he was asleep. His phone sat charging on the desk. I didn't need a password, he'd used the same one for years. I scrolled through messages, images, late-night plans wrapped in hearts and half-sent emojis. Margaret's name lit the screen like a warning light. I read them all. Every lie. Every promise. When I found one message from earlier that week, "You still smell like her perfume. It drives me crazy." My hand trembled, but not from shock. From the quiet thrill of confirmation. I copied everything to a flash drive and slipped it into the drawer with my old photo albums. He'd never think to look there. The restaurant he chose on Friday was the same one where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary decades ago. Candlelight, soft piano, tables close enough that whispers carried. He wore his navy jacket. I wore the blue dress again. We looked to anyone watching like a couple reliving old love. He reached across the table. "I know I've been distant," he said. "Work's been." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't waste the apology before you even know what you're sorry for." He blinked, confused. "Eve, what's going on?" I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. "Do you believe scent holds memory?" He frowned. "What?" "Perfume," I said softly. "You smell it and suddenly a moment comes back. A kiss, a touch, a lie." He stared at me like I was speaking another language. "You're scaring me," he whispered. "Good," I said. The waiter arrived just then, saving him. He smiled awkwardly, pretending everything was fine. Pretending was what he did best. I let him. That night he tried to be tender, holding me like he used to. But there was hesitation in his hands now, uncertainty behind his kisses. He could sense the shift even if he didn't understand it. When he fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and opened the window. The cool night air carried the faintest scent of lilies, wilting now just like his lies. I whispered into the dark, "She wore my perfume that night. But she won't wear it again." The next morning, I mailed an anonymous envelope to Margaret's husband. Inside, printed photos from the footage, a copy of the text messages and a single line written in red ink. "You deserve to know what your wife smells like." No name, no return address. Just truth wrapped neatly in silence. By afternoon I knew he'd received it. Small towns breathe gossip faster than wind. The salon didn't open that day. It didn't open the next. Tom noticed the tension but said nothing. He could sense storms but never where they started. On Sunday he found the perfume bottle missing. "Eve, did you move your perfume?" he called. "I gave it away," I said from the kitchen. "To who?" I looked up from the cutting board. "Someone who'll appreciate it." He hesitated, then laughed nervously. "You're in a strange mood lately." "Am I?" He nodded, unease creeping into his eyes. "You're different." "Maybe I'm just remembering," I said. That night I watched him from across the living room. The firelight flickered, catching his face in shades of gold and shadow. He looked older than I remembered, worn down by his own deceit. I wondered if he thought about her now. If he could still smell her on his skin or if guilt had washed it away. He met my gaze suddenly. "You're quiet." "I was just thinking," I said. "How scent fades faster than people expect. But memory lingers." He didn't respond. When he finally turned away, I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. In the days that followed, word spread. Margaret had left town. Some said to visit family, others whispered about a fight. I didn't need to know which was true. The outcome was enough. Tom grew restless. He started avoiding the mirror, turning it toward the wall like it made him uneasy. He didn't know why, but the instinct was right. Each night he checked his phone, expecting messages that never came. I pretended not to notice. Until one evening he asked quietly, "Eve, if someone made a mistake, could you forgive them?" I met his gaze, my reflection catching in the window behind him. "Forgiveness isn't something I wear anymore," I said. "It doesn't suit me." He nodded slowly, looking smaller somehow. I reached for the perfume bottle hidden in the drawer, opened it and let a single drop fall into the fire. The scent rose, sweet, burning, final. He inhaled, confused. "What's that smell?" "Just something old," I said. "Something that doesn't belong here anymore." And as the flames swallowed the last trace of that perfume, I finally felt the air clear. And as the flames swallowed the last trace of that perfume, I finally felt the air clear. For the first time in months, maybe years, the house smelled clean, like wood and smoke and truth. But truth is funny that way. It burns too, just slower. Tom was still sitting across from me, the reflection of the fire dancing across his face. He looked uneasy, like a man sitting beside something he couldn't name. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was me. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Not like yourself." I smiled faintly. Maybe this is myself. He looked at me for a long time, then back at the fire. "You're scaring me a little." "I'm not trying to," I said, though part of me knew I was. Not to hurt him, but to make him feel something real for once. He stood up, restless. "I'll check the garage before bed. I thought I smelled something strange earlier." I nodded. "Go ahead." When he left the room, I watched the embers shift, curling up like secrets too tired to hide anymore. The flames flickered lower, softer, whispering. The next morning the smell of smoke was still there. Faint but lingering. I opened the windows, letting the cold air sweep through. Outside the sky was gray, heavy with rain that never seemed to arrive. He was already gone, his coffee mug still half full, the newspaper folded open to the obituaries. I stared at the page for a long moment. Not at the names, but at the emptiness between them. The quiet that comes after endings. A knock at the door startled me. When I opened it, Deputy Harris stood on the porch, raincoat dripping. He'd been the town's officer for 20 years. An old friend of Tom's, though I never cared much for him. "Morning, Mrs. Walker," he said. "Sorry to bother you, but we got a call about some smoke last night. Neighbors thought maybe something caught fire." "Just the fireplace," I said, smiling politely. "We burned some old boxes." He peered past me into the living room, sniffing the air. "Smells like more than boxes." "Memory burns hotter than paper," I said softly. He blinked, confused. "What was that?" "Nothing. Would you like to check?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No need. Just wanted to make sure you're all right." "I'm fine," I said. "But thank you." As he left, I closed the door slowly. The lock clicked louder than usual. The day stretched long and heavy. I spent most of it in the garden, trimming the rose bushes that had overgrown since summer. Their thorns bit into my gloves, sharp enough to remind me I was still flesh and blood. Tom called around noon. "Everything okay there?" "Yes," I said. "Deputy stopped by." "What for?" "Smoke complaint." He sighed. "I told you that chimney needed cleaning." I let the silence hang before saying, "Maybe you're right. Maybe we should clean a lot of things." He didn't answer that. Just muttered something about finishing late and hung up. When evening came, the rain finally broke. It wasn't gentle. It came in sheets, hitting the windows so hard I could feel it in my chest. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the streetlights blur through the downpour. That's when I saw her. Margaret. Or maybe what was left of her. She stood across the street, hair plastered to her face, a dark coat clinging to her shoulders. Even from that distance I could see the tremor in her hands. She was staring straight at the house. For a moment I thought she'd cross the street, knock on my door, scream something she'd rehearsed all week. But she didn't. She just stood there motionless until a car passed, and when the headlights cleared, she was gone. I didn't move. Didn't even breathe. Just sat there letting the rain drown out everything else. Tom came home soaked, muttering about traffic and bad luck. "Storm's worse than they said," he said, tossing his coat aside. I didn't mention what I'd seen. Not yet. We ate in silence. The only sound was the steady tap of rain against the glass. Halfway through dinner the lights flickered once, twice, then went out. He groaned. "Great. The power." I lit the candles without a word. The flicker of flame filled the room again, soft and golden. For a moment the scene looked almost romantic. Then he looked up at me and flinched. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. You just look different in candlelight." "Older." "No," he said quickly. "Just different." I smiled. "That's fair." The wind howled outside, shaking the house. Somewhere in the distance a siren wailed, brief and fading. Tom got up, restless again. "I'll check the breaker." When he left, I watched the candlelight dance on the mirror across the room. For the briefest second I saw movement that wasn't mine. A shadow, slight but certain. The fire in the hearth hissed as rain leaked through the chimney cap. I turned away before I could think too much about what I'd seen. When the lights returned, Tom didn't come back right away. I found him in the garage, sitting on the old workbench, staring at something small in his hands. It was the perfume bottle. Burnt around the edges like it had been through fire. "Where did you get that?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Found it in the ashes out back." "Thought we burned it, didn't we?" "I thought so," I said. He finally met my eyes. "Eve, what's happening here?" "What do you mean?" "Things are off. The smell, the smoke, the mirrors. Sometimes I hear you when you're not in the room. I swear I hear your voice." I tilted my head slightly. "Maybe you're just remembering." "I'm serious," he said. His voice cracked. "It's like the house is different." "Maybe it's just showing you what you've done," I said quietly. He stared at me, searching for something in my face. "What have you done?" "I cleaned the house," I said. "That's all." But even as I said it, the faint scent of burnt lilies filled the air. He noticed it too. He dropped the bottle. It shattered at his feet. That night neither of us slept. I could hear him pacing the hallway outside our bedroom, muttering to himself, opening doors, closing them again. Around midnight the sound stopped. I went downstairs to find him sitting by the fire, staring into it the way he used to stare at me. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "I had a dream," he said finally. "You were standing in the garden, watching the roses burn." I sat beside him. "Dreams tell the truth when we can't." He rubbed his face, exhausted. "Are you saying you want me gone?" "I'm saying the house wants peace," I said. "And peace doesn't come easy." He looked up sharply. "Eve, if something happens to me." I cut him off with a small laugh. "You're always so dramatic." But deep inside something flickered. Not guilt. Just inevitability. The next morning I woke to the sound of sirens again. This time closer. Too close. I ran downstairs barefoot. The kitchen window glowed orange. Outside, a thin column of smoke curled into the sky, right from the garden. The rose bed. Tom was already outside, shouting for water, for help. The hose sputtered weakly. The fire licked the air, eating through the wet leaves. I stepped outside, the air thick and hot. "What happened?" "I don't know," he yelled. "It just started." Neighbors gathered at the fence, whispering. Deputy Harris arrived minutes later, pulling Tom aside. "Any accelerant?" he asked. Tom shook his head. "No. Nothing like that." But I saw his eyes dart to me. Harris frowned. "Strange how fire starts itself, huh?" "Stranger things have happened," I said quietly. They both looked at me. Neither said a word. By afternoon the fire was out. The roses were gone, blackened stems, ash and soil. Only one bloom survived, singed but still red. I picked it up carefully. The petals crumbled in my hand. Inside, Tom sat at the table, his head in his hands. "It's like the house is cursed," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "It's just telling the truth." He lifted his head slowly. "Did you?" I met his gaze. "The fire didn't start itself. He swallowed hard. Then who did? I leaned closer, close enough to smell the faint trace of smoke still clinging to his shirt. Maybe it was the same person who taught me how easy it is to burn something you love. He flinched. Neither of us spoke again. The silence between us felt alive, humming like an unlit match. That night I sat alone by the cold fireplace. The ashes were gray now, lifeless. But somewhere beneath them I thought I saw a faint red glow, small, stubborn, and still breathing. I didn't touch it. I just watched. Because I knew what came next. And deep down so did he. I didn't touch the faint red glow beneath the ashes. I just watched. Because I knew what came next. And deep down so did he. The house was silent that night. Not the easy kind of silence, but the thick, waiting kind, like the walls were holding their breath. I could hear Tom moving upstairs, his footsteps uncertain, slow. Every sound he made echoed differently now, bouncing off a house that no longer felt like it belonged to him. He called out once. My name. Soft, almost tender. Eve. I didn't answer. Instead, I ran my hand across the mantel, collecting a trace of gray ash on my fingertips. It felt warm, still alive. I pressed it between my fingers until it disappeared. He came down the stairs wearing that same old robe he refused to throw away. His eyes were hollow from sleepless nights, his voice dry. Are you still awake? Apparently, I said. He stared at the cold fireplace, then at me. I can't do this anymore. Do what? This house, this, whatever this is. It's haunted. I tilted my head. By who? He swallowed. By you. I smiled gently. I live here, Tom. No, he said, shaking his head. You linger. You walk through rooms like you're somewhere else. You watch me like you're waiting for something. It's like you're not even. He stopped himself, biting his lip. Not even what? He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his expression cracked. Alive. I didn't flinch. Maybe that's what happens when someone burns too long in silence. The rain had stopped by morning, but the air felt heavy, as though the storm hadn't truly left. Tom avoided me during breakfast, moving around the kitchen like a stranger in his own home. I think I'll take a few days off, he said finally. Go stay at the cabin. The one by the lake? He nodded. Clear my head. I stirred my tea. You'll need matches. The fireplace there's temperamental. I'll manage, he muttered. Yes, I said softly. You always do. He hesitated at the door. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said. That's what makes it worse. He blinked, uncertain how to answer. Then he left. When the car disappeared down the road, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The house seemed to exhale with me. I spent the day cleaning again. Not for him, never again for him, but for me. I scrubbed the walls, the floors, the windows until every reflection shone back at me. The mirrors caught the light differently now, sharper, almost watching. By late afternoon I found myself in his study. His desk was neat, as if he'd tried to leave it that way for my sake. I opened the drawer. The flash drive was still there, tucked beneath the photo albums. I plugged it in. The footage played. Him and Margaret. The same laughter. The same perfume. But this time I didn't stop it. I watched until the very end, until the image flickered and froze on his face. Smiling, careless, unknowing. Then I deleted it. Every file. Every message. Revenge had done its job. I didn't need to live here anymore. Still, when the final file vanished, I whispered, "You can rest now." I wasn't sure if I meant him, her, or myself. That night the house felt too still. I turned off the lights and sat by the window, watching the darkness beyond the glass. A thin fog crept along the road. For a moment I thought I saw movement near the gate. A shape, faint, familiar. Margaret again. Or maybe just a shadow. It didn't matter. She had her punishment. The world would handle her in its own quiet way. I went to bed early, but sleep never came. The clock ticked past midnight before I heard it. The distant rumble of a car engine. Headlights swept across the wall, then stopped outside. Tom. I sat up, heart steady, not racing. Calm as ever. He came in quietly, dripping from the fog. The cabin's colder than I thought, he said, voice trembling slightly. I told you to take matches, I replied. He tried to smile. You were right as always. I nodded. Yes. I usually am. He hesitated at the doorway, then walked to the hearth. Mind if I start a fire? I gestured toward the woodpile. Be my guest. The flames came slow, crackling weakly before catching. The room filled with that familiar glow, orange, alive, almost forgiving. He sat across from me. I don't know how we got here, he said. All this bitterness, the silence. Because you mistook my silence for forgiveness, I said. And it wasn't. He winced. I know I did wrong. You just wanted comfort, I interrupted. And when she made you feel young again, you forgot I was still here. Waiting. He looked down. If I could take it back. You can't. The fire popped loudly between us, scattering small sparks across the hearth. He sighed. Then what happens now? I studied him for a long moment. His face was tired, worn. There was no malice left in him, only fear and regret. The kind of regret that arrives too late. You tell me, I said. You started this. I didn't mean. The fire. I asked softly. His head snapped up. What? You said last night the house felt haunted. Maybe it's not haunted, Tom. Maybe it's just remembering. He stared at me, pale now. Eve, what did you do? I leaned forward. I stopped forgiving. The wind outside picked up, pressing against the windows until the glass trembled. The fire roared higher as if stirred by something unseen. Tom stood suddenly. Eve, please. Sit, I said. My voice didn't raise, but he obeyed. Always did in the end. You said I was your angel once, I whispered. You were right. Angels don't come to save, Tom. They come to collect. He backed away, shaking his head. You wouldn't. But I already had. The flames surged, licking higher, brighter. The scent of lilies filled the air again. Sweet, choking, impossible. He coughed, waving his arms. What's happening? He cried. The house is telling the truth, I said simply. Smoke curled around us, soft and gray. I didn't move. I just watched as he stumbled toward the door, pulling at the handle that wouldn't turn. Eve. Open it. It's open, I said. You just never saw how. He pounded against it, desperate. Help me. I rose slowly, walking toward him. I did once. You just didn't notice. The firelight flashed across the mirror above the mantel. For a heartbeat I saw two reflections, his frantic face and mine, calm still. Then only one. When it was over, the fireman said it must have been an accident. Old wiring. Maybe a spark from the hearth. They never asked too many questions. They saw an old woman sitting on the front steps, face streaked with ash, staring at the house she'd once called home. One of them asked if I had anywhere to go. I said yes. The cabin by the lake. They helped me into the truck, their boots crunching over the blackened ground. As we drove away, I looked back once. The house stood silent, hollow, smoke curling into the pale morning sky. The cabin was quiet, almost too quiet. But the air smelled clean, pine and rain and freedom. I opened the windows and let the wind move through every room. On the small table near the fireplace, I set down a single item I'd carried with me. The surviving rose from the garden. It had dried now, fragile but intact. I placed it beside the matches. 4 days I stayed there, listening to the lake shift against the shore. Some nights I heard footsteps on the porch, the echo of a voice calling my name. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Weeks passed before anyone mentioned Tom again. They said he must have been trapped, that maybe he'd gone back inside trying to save something. I didn't correct them. He had gone back inside, yes, but not to save. To understand. I walked down to the water that evening, the sun melting into the horizon. The reflection rippled and wavered, and for a moment, I saw my younger self staring back. She looked tired, but she smiled. I whispered to her, "It's done." And it was. I stayed by the lake until night fell. The air grew colder, sharper, filled with the quiet sounds of crickets and wind through the reeds. I lit a single candle and placed it by the window. Its flame flickered gently, steady but alive. As I turned to leave the room, I caught my reflection one last time in the glass. The candlelight framed me, soft and gold. For the first time in years, I didn't look like a shadow. I looked free. I smiled faintly and whispered, "He called me his angel." The wind sighed against the cabin door, almost like an answer. He was right.